What I want to do today in my part of this symposium is to try to frame the nature of the issue and have you understand the gravity of the issue as well. First of all, fleet safety, what you don't know can hurt you. Companies that are trucking companies, DOT, big rigs, they get it. But companies that aren't trucking companies, contractors, other businesses that may have a small fleet, passenger cars, pickup trucks, et cetera, that aren't governed by the DOT may not get this issue because they're not heavily regulated, certainly not by the DOT. So what's the big deal? I'm not a trucking company. And to answer that question, you need to know some facts and understand something about our legal system. According to the National Safety Council, there were 34,000 deaths related to motor vehicles in 2009, and as Cindy said earlier, it's the leading cause of occupational fatality in this country. The estimated cost of crash-related deaths in 2008, which is the last year I could find information on, $237 billion. That used to be a lot of money, not so much anymore, I guess. In the 1970s, alcohol was a factor in 60% of all fatalities. Today, that percentage has dropped to 40%. Why do you suppose that is? It's the American public has said alcohol and driving are a bad combination, and Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and other organizations have said, you know, this is a problem, this is a public health issue, and we need to deal with that. And so drinking and driving is down, and certainly by that percentage, from 60% to 40% of fatalities related to alcohol. And according to the Harvard Center for Risk Analysis, cell phones are a factor in 20% of all traffic fatalities, which is about 636,000 crashes a year. That's a bunch. It's been said of our legal system that it's the worst there is, and that's true, except for all the rest. Meaning that if you're injured by a drunk driver, for example, if you're injured by somebody else who crashes into you, our legal system will give you access, even if you have no money. Our legal system will give you access to hear your case. And if you're on the receiving end of an injury, you might not think our legal system is so bad. As a defendant, you might think it's bad. So let's understand a couple of definitions here. Negligence, because that term is bandied about, and when people get sued, they're sued for negligence. What is negligence? Well, it's when a person owes a legal duty to somebody else, they breach that duty, and that breach causes harm to another person, either bodily injury or property damage. And that definition of bodily injury is pretty broad. And the standard of care that we're often held to is the prudent man theory. So if you're involved in a legal action and you're a defendant, you're going to have to show that you behaved responsibly and reasonably. The prudent man theory. What would a reasonable person do in similar circumstances? The question that often gets asked is, if I let somebody with a really crummy driving record drive my company vehicle or their own vehicle on company business, is it reasonable of me as a business owner to let them do that? And it's hard to answer that question, because the answer is oftentimes it's indefensible. And then insurance companies have a harder time defending you in cases like that. They just write the check and the plaintiff fills in the zeros. What's gross negligence? Because that term gets used about. They were grossly negligent. Well, it's like negligence. You still owe somebody a legal duty, but it's a wanton and reckless disregard for the duties owed and a similar regard for the likely consequences of those actions. So what's the difference between negligence and gross negligence? Matter of degree, perhaps? The good news is that your auto liability policies for your businesses, and your personal auto for that matter, it's designed to cover bodily injury and property damage for which you're legally responsible, for which you're legally liable. So when someone might erroneously say, well, you'll be grossly negligent, your insurance is going to pay for that. Insurance is designed to pay for your negligence, whether it be gross or ordinary negligence. When you're legally responsible and somebody suffered bodily injury or property damage. So what's reasonable? What's reasonable to expect of owners and operators of vehicles, and who defines reasonable? Let's ask that question here this way. Our insurance carrier will tell me when I have a bad driver. Is that reasonable? Anybody think that's reasonable? Raise your hand. Why not? Why is that not reasonable? If I have a bad driver, my insurance company they run MVRs, don't they? Don't they check the motor vehicle records and they'll let me know if there's a bad driver? How about this? My broker runs MVRs every year and they'll let me know if there's a problem. Anybody? Am I preaching to the choir? If my driver still has a valid driver's license, he can't be that bad, can he? Seriously. I mean, honestly, I get that from clients. Well, for God's sakes, he's got a driver's license. The state says he's okay. How bad can he be? She's not a professional driver, really. She's a marketing professional. The vehicle comes with the job. The criteria should be more forgiving. She has to entertain clients. Is that reasonable? Many insureds think these are reasonable. How about this one? That person makes me a lot of money. I can't take the car away. I see that a lot, and some people are nodding. I see that. I see those arguments on the client side. I really do. There's another issue here that we should talk about briefly, which is negligent entrustment. What is it? And why is it important to me? And what do I do about it? It's a cause of action in tort law that arises where one party is held liable for negligence. Remember, negligence is an insurable item. Liable for negligence because they provided another party with a dangerous instrumentality, such as a vehicle or a gun. Or it really isn't limited to vehicles or guns. It's a legal principle. Okay? And when you're accused of being negligent and you negligently entrusted somebody with your company vehicle and they had a crummy driver's license or for whatever reason were not a competent driver, you're going to find yourself in an area where defending in court is going to be difficult. So what? I have insurance. Remember I said you're covered for ordinary and gross negligence when someone experiences bodily injury or property damage. Actual damages are covered in most insurance policies, but punitive damages are not. Punitive damages are not. And punitive damages are awarded by juries and court systems to punish the tortfeasor or to punish the wrongdoer. So if you are negligent and somebody experienced bodily injury or property damage, and they want to punish you, whether the judge or the jury, if it gets that far, wants to punish you, they'll levy punitive damages. And punitive damages can be relatively modest, or they could be millions and millions of dollars. And they're not insurable in most states. And that goes right to the bottom line. Most cases where if your defense attorney feels like you're going to get taken to the cleaners, those don't even make it to court. They're settled out of court, and there's no punitive damages levied because it never made it to the court system. So why is this important? There's an increasing frequency of negligent entrustment claims across the U.S. There's a growing trend to include punitive damages, which are typically not insured, and accidents involving negligent entrustment usually involve serious bodily injury because somebody wants to be made whole. How about this one? The driver failed to stop at a red light, hit 4 vehicles, 12 injured, including a 5-year-old that resulted in brain damage and a fatality to a 37-year-old who was pregnant. That wasn't so good. That ended up in a settlement of $11 million. That was big. How about this one? Driver crossed the median, collided head-on with another vehicle, causing severe bodily injury to the other driver, settled for $7.8 million. One last, or two more here. This lady, Alicia Bustos, was a passenger in the back seat of a Buick when her car was hit by an F-150, think superintendent. An F-150 whose driver was using a cell phone at the time of the crash. Jury awarded $20.98 million, later reduced to $16.8 million. That's big. How about this one? This one I have personal knowledge of. The insured was, I put was because they're now out of business. They were a well servicing contractor in Texas. It had been raining, so the owner takes the crew to the bar for some team building. And after several hours and multiple pitchers of beer, they all left in their company vehicles, got into a little speed contest, crossed the line and hit a car with 4 teenage girls in it. 3 fatalities and 1 severe brain injury. The auto policy paid policy limits of $1 million, and then the reinsurance had to pay the rest. That was a big claim. So, how defensible are your acts or omissions? Think about your company. What's acceptable? How bad is bad in terms of a motor vehicle record when you run those? How bad is bad? This is common MVR criteria, and this is not hard and fast, but this is what insurance companies over the years have judged that, you know, if you can meet this criteria, we have a much better chance of defending you in court. It's not perfect, but it's good. So, no major violations within the past 5 years. What's a major? I'll get to that in a second. No more than 3 minor violations within the past 3 years. That's pretty reasonable criteria. So, these are major violations. Drag racing, fleeing or attempting to elude a police officer, reckless driving, and I would tell you convictions, not citations, but convictions for these things. DUI, refusal to take an alcohol test, speeding in excess of 25 miles over the limit. Somebody gets a major on their record and it's within 5 years, you shouldn't let them drive the company vehicle or their own vehicle on company time. Oops. Minor violations, basically anything that's not major. Moving violations, including defective equipment. Why do I put that in there? Don't we all know that defective equipment or speeding tickets reduced 99% of the time, perhaps? Does it violate somebody's due process to assume that that's defective equipment? Probably. Do I care? Not really. Okay, so majors and minors. Think about the folks, if you're not running your MVRs a couple of times a year for your drivers, or perhaps in real time, monthly, which there are services that will do that for you, you're probably missing the boat.